All right, again, welcome to the FlexMLS How to Close a Property course. So let's get right into it. In order to close a property, under Menu, under the Add Change section, if we go under Change Listing, you'll see that you're going to have a list of all of your active properties. In case you've got any already changed to pending, you'll also have that pending option. But let's start straight from active. So say that we want to change the status of this first property here. We're just going to click on the MLS number. And first thing you can do, I just want to note, is change the list price. So in case you need to do a price reduction or a price increase, you can change that list price just by checking that change list price. But what I want to talk about is changing the status of the property. So it's obviously set to active right now, but in case we want to change the status to pending, we're just going to click that Penned Listing or Under Contract button. As you can see here, you've got the option to select the date. So if we wanted to change the status to pending as of today, we would just click on today's date. And then any contingency marks or remarks that you want to make about the property, you can do so here. If I'm happy with that, I can click Save, or in this case, I'm just going to click Back. So one of the questions, though, is when does the status of a property change to pending from active? So for a resale property, a property that has already been sold once before, it's not pre-construction, it's going to change to pending once you have your accepted offer and you have your 10% deposit into escrow with the 50% closing costs. That's when you're going to change the status. So you've lifted contingencies, you've got that 10% deposit into escrow, now you should change the status to pending. In the case of representing pre-construction developments, when are you going to change the status for that? So when representing pre-construction, the status changes once you have a signed purchase request form. So there's no money down, there's nothing on the table yet except an offer to the developer. Once you have that document, then the status changes to pending. Does that make sense? Let me know if you have any questions about that. Either unmute yourself or type in that chat box. To change a status to closed, you're just going to click that Close Listing. And in here, we're going to choose the sold date, the date that you closed the property. In this case, if I was going to say today, I would click the date. And I'd need to put in the sold price of the property. So not the list price, but the price that you actually sold the property for. Then a part where people get a little bit confused is the selling member. So keep in mind that as the listing agent, your information is already in there. When we went in and added the listing, your name was listed as the listing agent. So the selling member is, like it mentions below here, this is the person who represents the buyer in the transaction. So you don't need to mark yourself again. In this case, say that Sylvia Elias brought the buyer. I would just start to type her name. Well, okay, Sylvia, you're not in there. Well, anyway, you get the idea. If I type the agent's name, they should appear in there, and that will be our selling member, the buyer's agent. In the case that Sylvia was working with someone else, maybe she has a team member, maybe you're dealing with two agents that are a group, you can put that co-selling member. So the co-selling member is not yourself, the selling member is not yourself, unless you actually sold the property yourself. So be sure to just put the other agent's name in there. Typically, you're not going to have a co-selling member, but in some instances, you might. So when does a property change from pending to closed? This will be once you have, in the case of a resale, once you've already closed at the notary. So funds have been released and you've signed in front of the notario, then you're going to go right back in and change this status to sold. In the case of pre-construction developments, when does the status change? Once you have the initial 35 or 30% deposit, or in the case of Harbor 171, when you've got a 25% deposit, and you've got that signed sales contract. So the 12 or 15 page document, and that money down, then you'll change this status. So don't change that status of pre-construction, once once the buyers get the deed. We want to see that information now. So we'll change it once we have that 30% down. Any questions there on how to change that status? Okay. In the event that you're selling a property and the buyer's agent is not an AMPI member, what do you do there? In that case, in selling member, we can type in non, and you'll see right there, non-AMPI member. So when it comes time to reporting the top agencies and agents, then non-AMPI member will be removed and it'll be the top actual real agents. But in the event that you sell the property to someone who's not an AMPI member, now you have that option, non-AMPI member. All right, if there's no questions, I just want to note too that you have two other options available to you here. One is to withdraw a listing temporarily. So this is in the event that maybe your seller says, "Oh, we need to do a remodel, so we want to just pull it off the market for a month or so and then put it right back on." You would want to withdraw there. And then if you want to cancel that listing, you can also do so here by clicking cancel. Keep in mind this is permanent, so you're only going to want to cancel if your seller says, "Look, I don't want to sell the property anymore." The next thing I want to cover is under MLS Internet. So if we click on menu, under Daily Functions, MLS Intranet. And the MLS Intranet, if you haven't used this before, is a lot like the library of all of the things that you need to know about using the MLS and about policies and things. So if we look under MLS Policy and Procedures, and we click on this first Policy and Procedures, it's going to download for us a Word document. And if I open this document, eventually it will open. All right. So this document talks about when adding a new listing, what to do, which documents you need in the event of selling fractional, properties that have never been deeded, various things, correct listings, renewing or extending. What we want to do is come down to closing a listing. So in case that you've forgotten how to close a listing from this course today, keep in mind that in this document, number 5, closing a listing. It also talks about closing pre-sales, pre-construction. And if we scroll down even further, there are some various instances of when properties haven't been in the MLS before. So in this case, adding a sold listing that is not in Flex for comp purposes. So here are all the things that you'll need to do. Add the listing into the Flex. Be sure to change the property to sold status. Then back in that MLS Intranet, at the very bottom under the Policies and Procedures section is this responsive letter privacy law. This is for your broker to sign. So this document, as it mentions right here, is a document that gives you the responsibility, or your broker, the responsibility of listing the proper information in the MLS. In this case, since we don't have a seller to sign off on it, we just want this for comp purposes. You're going to take the responsibility. So you don't need the seller's signature, you don't need a buyer's signature, you just need this responsive letter. And Marcella says that FlexMLS admin is working on formatting this to make it easy to read. So yeah, mine is in edit mode still, so sorry about that. The next thing that we want to cover is reporting a sold as an expired listing. So in the event that you had a listing active, it since expired, but then later, while it was expired, someone purchased the property. So in this case, you'll also need to submit that responsive letter. You'll need to email Marcella with the listing number and the above documents, and change the status to sold at that point. And then it talks about reactivation of canceled or withdrawn listings. So any questions on any of those things? Another example of closing a listing where we've seen this recently, agents upload the listing into the MLS. They receive an MLS number for the property, but it's not actually approved by Marcella. So it shows that it's active, but it hasn't been approved. In this case, in the event that you sell the property, it's the same situation here, where you're going to need to make sure that you have all of these proper documents in line. And then she can change the status from unapproved to sold. Any questions on how to do that? If there's no questions. The last course there was lots of questions. You guys make this easy. Marcella, is there anything you want to add since you're with us tonight? Nothing? Okay.
Sorry. Sorry. I was allowed to mute myself. Sorry, my dog is back. Okay. Now, I just would like to confirm, or just to reconfirm that when you are adding a listing for statistics proposals, please change the listings to sold status first, so we can approve it already as a sold listing. That's something that I requested the agents who send the listings, the sold listings for approval. Just change the status to sold before sending to me, so I can approve it as a sold listing. That's one of the points that I would like to enforce.
Yes.
Okay.
Does that make sense to everyone? So what Marcella's talking about is when you add that listing for comp purposes, right away, and as soon as you upload it, change the status. Go back in and under change listing, change that status to sold right away, and then go and send Marcella an email and all the documents so that she can change it, right away for you. There was a question from Mariana. So to upload, Mariana, you want to expand on what your question is? There we go. To add a sold property, we have to add it like a new listing after it's approved and instantly change it to sold. Yep, that's what Marcella was just talking about. So, and again, if you guys have any questions on how to do this, keep it in mind under menu, FlexMLS Intranet, and then go to that Policies and Procedures section. You can find this document under MLS Policy and Procedures version right now, 12.17. And that'll walk you through all the steps that you need to take before you email Marcella. As a side note too, when emailing Marcella, just to make it easier on her, include the MLS number in the subject line of your email. That way she knows exactly which property you're talking about. It'll make her life and your life much easier. Any other questions? Don't be shy to have if you have a question. Probably someone else has the same one. When closing a property not listed, oops, let me scroll back up. When closing a property not listed on FlexMLS and reporting for comp purposes, do we get credit for that? Yep, of course you do. So you'll go back in, you'll be the listing agent, and you can close it for either if there was another agent involved, then obviously you're going to put the buyer's agent in there, and if there wasn't another agent involved, you can put non-AMPI, or if you were the buyer's agent and the seller's agent, you're going to put yourself in both times. So we can go, let's go back in and look at that. So we would add the listing, and we'd go into change listing. We'd go back in, go straight to close listing. We'd put in that sold date, whatever our sales price is. And then in this case, maybe it was just yourself, so we put non-AMPI member, and then click save. Pre-construction sales that are not listed on Flex. Yep, same exact thing, Mary. So you're going to add all that information in there and do the same thing. Mariana, do you want to expand on that question a bit? She asks, do you have to go do it also a contract? I think you mean like a listing agreement. We had a property that sold before it listed on Flex. Yeah, so the question is, we had a property, and then the property sold before they listed it in Flex. Should we report that? And that's actually the reason for doing this course is keep in mind that FlexMLS isn't for AMPI. It's not for the brokers. It's for us as agents. It's for everyone to get as much information as they can. And that really helps all of us, especially when doing things like CMAs. And it helps the public understand what's going on in the market as well. So what AMPI wants to see is us agents put as much information into the system as possible, because the more information we put in, the more information we get out. So yeah, you should go back in, report that sale, even if you didn't have a listing agreement signed, or if you did, great. Make sure you get all of those documents like we covered in here to Marcella, and then you can close the property. When can I enter it? Mary asks. I may have forgotten what your question was, Mary, so pre-construction. Do you have a particular property that you're talking about, Mary? And maybe I can answer your question a little better. Marcella also notes, when you're entering this for stats purposes, it's important that once you have the listing number, you can change it to pending first and then change it to closed. And Mary, if you just want to expand on what your question was or what your comment was, I'll be happy to answer that. Example, V Marina, 10% down, 30% in July. Yeah, so in that case, this isn't something we have actually covered in our committee meeting. Marcella, I'm going to refer this to you. So it looks like Mary has a 10% deposit down. Presumably you also have a sales contract in place, and then you're going to be getting 30% in July. Okay, in that case, I think you should probably report the sale now. That way we have the statistics, and the 10%, even though it's not the full 30%, like some of these other developments, that doesn't matter. in reality. For example, I mentioned Harbor 171 earlier. They only require 25% down, but we still expect them to report the sales at the same time. So they don't need to wait until they receive 30% in total. So in this case, I think I'm just going to kind of speak for the committee on this. I think that you're okay to put down the information at the 10% deposit, since you've got that deposit and a contract. You're very welcome. All right, any other questions, scenarios that you can think of that you might need help with? You know, like I always mention, it's pretty straightforward. If you do have questions, don't be shy to shoot me an email, send me a phone call or a WhatsApp message or something and ask me. Or you can ask Marcella as well. And additionally, the first place you should look is going to be that MLS Internet, Intranet, Policies and Procedures. Oops, let's click on it. And that first document, that's going to be your best friend for answers to these questions. Pretty simple, straightforward course. Again, you know, the more information we get into the MLS system, the more information we get out of it. So reporting your sales, it's a really great thing to do in order to stay up to date on what's going on in the market. All right, if there are no more questions, then we can end the course today. Oh, Mariana asks, when are we going to be able to add new developments? I'm aware it's on standby. Great question. So I believe in our last committee meeting that we are actually going to be lifting that moratorium and that temporary ban on new developments. But you'll also want to check those requirements under developments. So developer requirements. And there are some changes and things going on right now as we speak, to better protect our buyers. So be sure to check with Marcella or this document or both to see what the most recent requirements are. We just want to make sure that everything is good and that our buyers are going to be happy in the end and get what they're paying for. So if you are trying to upload a particular development, send an email to me, send an email to Marcella, and we can help kind of guide you through how to proceed. Thanks, Aldo. Good to see you here tonight. All right. Again, like I mentioned, if there are no more questions, make sure your name, your information is on this chart. And I'm going to stop recording.